Hey, it's Junior Jean-Baptiste here to tell you the 2 reasons why I do not recommend that you buy property to start this business today. And by this business, I mean the Airbnb, or as others like to call it, the short-term rental business. Now, I'm doing this video because whenever I tell people that I'm into Airbnb, that I'm doing Airbnb, the first question I always get asked is, Junior, you own all those properties? When did you buy all those properties? You know, how much down payment did you put in? Questions like that. And if you know me, if you read my ebooks, then you know that I have never bought a single one of my apartments that I've made money off of. The fact is, I've been profiting off this business for the past 2.5 years, and I've never owned a single property, and I do not recommend that you buy property, particularly if you're just starting out with this business. How I do this business is by convincing the landlords to let me use their property to run this business. So, I'll rent the apartment the same way a typical tenant would. I'll sign a lease for a year. I'll pay them rent money month after month. And the only difference between myself and a regular tenant is that I get the landlord's permission to use their property for Airbnb. And I'm not the only one doing this. You can find hundreds of other people out there doing the same exact thing. Now, before I get into those 2 reasons, I do want to say that there are some benefits to owning property, right? There's a benefit of, if it's your property, you have that pride of knowing that it's yours. There's also tax benefits, right? Being able to write deductions more on your mortgage and all that good stuff. And then there's particularly 2 benefits that would interest me, that would entice me to be a property owner. The first benefit is that by being a property owner, you have complete control over the property. So if you want to make any type of changes or anything like that, you don't need to get permission from anyone. Whereas if you're a tenant, you don't have that same kind of control. Now, the reason why I'm sharing this with you is because I'm going through a situation like this right now. I decided to reinvest a good portion of the profits that I've made into remodeling my apartments. So these apartments were built 45 years ago, so they're a bit run down, they're a bit dinged up, and I decided to reinvest some of my profits that I've made in this business into making those apartments better, and I would do this at no cost to the owner. So I would pay everything and the owners would have to pay a dime. And I approached my landlords about this, and 2 in particular were a bit hesitant. They were a bit hesitant to actually let me do this, and it's been kind of a hassle of me going back and forth, saying, hey, listen, I'm the one that's going to be paying for it. Don't worry, it's going to look nicer. I'm going to hook it up. And even still, they don't want to let me do it. If you knew them, you'd probably understand why. They're a bit more mature in age, so they just kind of have that old dog mentality of preferring to keep things just the way they are. And it's a bit frustrating because I know that upgrading them is going to help increase the value. It's going to help us all make more money. But still, despite the fact that I'm going to be the one paying for absolutely everything, they're not too fond of it, right? They love me. We have a great relationship. I've earned their trust. I've been doing this business for the past 2.5 years with their apartments, and even still, they won't let it. They're not too fond of the idea. The other landlords, they were fond of the idea. They said, great, go ahead, which was probably what you would expect from many landlords, right? Because especially if the tenant is the one paying for everything. But I digress, right? So anyways, so it's a bit of a limiting factor because I know remodeling them and upgrading them is going to increase their value and help us make more money. But they're not too fond of the idea, and that's a bit limiting. So in that sense, that's one benefit that I would personally like to have as a property owner, and that's one benefit to being a property owner. The second benefit that I personally enjoy as a property owner is the higher profit margins. So as a property owner, let's say, for example, that you have a 2-bedroom apartment that that you can charge $1,500 a month for. And you find that same exact apartment in your area could generate about $3,000 a month on Airbnb, right? Because when you list an apartment on Airbnb, it'll typically tend to make more money on Airbnb as opposed to renting to a long-term tenant. As a property owner, that $3,000 is all yours to keep, right? Before taxes and everything, right? It's all yours to keep. Whereas if you're a tenant, right? You're renting that property. You're still gonna have to pay the landlord, right? The $1,500, and then the $1,500 remaining from the $3,000, right? That $1,500 is yours to keep. So it's less profit margins, and in that sense, that would be the second benefit that I would enjoy as a property owner. But even despite those two benefits, even despite having greater control and having higher profit margins, I still do not recommend buying property. And here are the two reasons why, especially for people that are just getting started out in this business. This first reason is really going to apply. So the first reason is when it comes to buying property. Now, I've never bought property before personally, but I've seen my mom buy property, and I've seen others that I know buy property, and I know that the process is just simply more involved. It requires a lot more than renting a property, right? It requires a lot more money. It requires a lot more energy, focus, more documents, paperwork to sign, and things like that. More time. There's just more risk involved. There's a lot more involved when it comes to buying a property. And I personally don't want to go through that. And if you're just getting started out with this business, you probably don't want to go through that either, right? Especially with the money aspect. Now, when it comes to buying property, you're going to need to put a down payment. And generally speaking, now you can get away in some cases of not putting a down payment, but the higher the down payment that you put, the better your interest rates and lower your premiums. So it's ideal to put a bigger down payment. The ideal one, generally speaking, is around 20%. So on a property that's worth $250,000, that means you have to put $50,000 down. And again, if you're just starting out with this business, you probably don't have that kind of money lying around to put down on a property. And even if you have $10,000 to put down, right? Again, you want to get the ideal interest rates and the ideal premiums, because long term, right? You could end up paying a lot of money in interest rates. My mom right now is paying a lot of money in interest rates, right? So putting low money down, it sounds great in theory, but you're gonna end up paying a lot more in the long term because of that. So ultimately, for that reason, I don't recommend buying property. It just requires a lot more money down, and then the process is a lot more involved. And so even if you have that kind of money lying around, and you're willing to go through it, you might still want to hear my second reason why I do not recommend that you buy property to start this business. Now, the second reason why I don't recommend that you buy property to start this business is that ultimately, we're not in the best time to be buying property. A lot of people right now are predicting that we're headed towards a real estate market crash. And what this would mean is that the property that you buy, the value of it would be significantly decreased after a real estate crash. So if you were to buy a property for $300,000, that same property that you buy right after real estate crash would probably be worth pennies. It would be worth pennies on the dollar, right? Now, some people debate this. They say, oh, it's not going to happen. It's just conspiracy theory. It's fear mongering. I don't really think it's conspiracy theory. If you do enough research, you're just going to find out ultimately that's just how the market works, right? It rises and falls, and that's just it's just the nature of things. And right now, a lot of people are predicting that we're headed towards that very soon. I wish I could tell you when exactly this is supposed to happen, but unfortunately I can't. The only thing I could tell you is that a lot of people in the know are predicting that it will happen. So don't take my word for it. Do your own research. You'll find a bunch of articles and a bunch of evidence that supports that we are headed towards a crash. So it'd be much easier for you if you were just renting an apartment as opposed to owning one, right? Should a crash happen, you're not tied down to the apartment in the same way as if you were the owner, the property owner, especially if you just bought it, right? So, like I said again, for those reasons, for that, particularly for those two reasons, I don't recommend that you buy property. It's like I said before, you do not need to own property to build this business. I've been doing this business for the past 2.5 years, and I've never owned a single one of my apartments, and I'm not the only one. You can find a bunch of other people out there, and so you can start conservative, and I recommend that you start conservative. Rent an apartment and test this business out, and you'll find that you can make a lot of money, right, without needing to own property, okay? So that's pretty much it for today. If you like this video, make sure to like the video. If you're not in my Facebook group, then make sure to join that as well too. Subscribe and stay tuned, because I'm going to be coming up with more content on the process of building this business, of starting from scratch and taking it to 6 figures and beyond. Right? So stay tuned, and I'll talk to you later.